The rain came down hard that night. It came like it had something to say. In the village of Umunna, where the red earth roads turned to mud after every storm, people heard the shouting long before they saw what was happening. One by one, doors opened. Heads peeked out into the wet darkness. And then they saw it. Obinna, the great Obinna, standing in front of his large cement house, his face twisted with rage. In his hands, a small cloth bag. He threw it into the mud like it was nothing. Behind him, standing in the doorway, was an old woman.
Mama Arlise.
She was thin and trembling. Her wrapper was soaked through. Her gray hair was pressed flat against her head by the rain. But she did not cry. She did not scream. She just stood there, watching her son with calm, tired eyes. "You will not embarrass me in this house," Obinna shouted. "Not in front of my guests. Not again.
Leave.
Tonight." Mama Arlise stepped forward slowly. Her voice was low but clear. "I carried you. I raised you alone. This is the house I built with my own suffering." Obinna did not move. He pointed down the road into the dark. She picked up her bag from the mud. She walked. An old man watching from across the fence shook his head and whispered to no one in particular. The day a man chases his mother away, his fortune begins to walk away with her. By morning, the whole village was talking. In the market, women gathered around the yam sellers. At the palm wine bar near the church road, men sat with cups they forgot to drink from. Everywhere, the story moved from mouth to mouth, growing a little bigger with each telling. Some people were angry. Is this what education does to a man? Teaches him to throw his own mother into the rain. Others were careful with their words. We do not know what happened inside that house. A man has the right to run his home. Young women shook their heads. Old women pressed their lips together and said nothing, which was worse than speaking. The children who had always admired Obinna's big car and generator now whispered among themselves, not sure what to think. But through all the noise, one name kept returning.
Mama Arlise.
The woman everyone had seen at the market, always buying in small quantities, always smiling anyway. The woman who had worked in other people's farms when the money ran out. The woman who never once asked for pity. Where had she gone? Who had taken her in? An elder named Matsi Obi sat outside his hut, listening to the reports come in. When a young man finished telling him what had happened, Matsi Obi was quiet for a long time. Then he said softly, "If these young people only knew the price that woman paid for his success, they would weep. To understand what happened that rainy night, you must go back. Back before the big house. Back before the car. Back before the name Obinna meant anything to anyone outside Umunna. But first, you must understand what Obinna became, because the height of a man's rise tells you how far he can fall." He returned from the city 6 years ago. It was a Saturday. He drove down the main road in a silver car and children chased after it, laughing and pointing. He wore a crisp white shirt and shoes that did not belong in dust. He spoke in English even when Igbo would have been faster. The village did not know what to do with its pride. Elders blessed him publicly. Women cooked for 3 days. His name was spoken in prayers. Parents pointed at him when scolding their lazy children. You see, Obinna? That is what hard work looks like. He built his house where his mother's old mud home once stood. Cement walls, a tin roof that gleamed in the sun, a gate with a padlock. People found reasons to walk past it just to see. But behind every praise, behind every raised cup in his name, one question lived quietly in the hearts of those who were old enough to remember. How did a woman with nothing raise a son who had everything? That story, the real story, was one most people had already forgotten. Obinna himself seemed to be trying. Her name was Arlise before the village called her Mama Arlise. She was given that name, Mama, the way you give a title to someone whose sacrifice has earned it. She became a widow when Obinna was only 7 years old. Her husband, a gentle man who farmed groundnuts, died from a fever that came quickly and stayed. There was no money. There was no family nearby who could help without making her feel the weight of their help. So she worked. She farmed from before the sun rose. She sold firewood. She carried other people's loads at the market for coins. When Obinna needed new sandals for school, she went 3 days without eating proper meals so she could save the money. She never told him this. She did not want him to carry guilt. She wanted him to carry books. When the school fees came and she did not have enough, she sold her earrings. They were gold, a gift from her mother. She held them for one long moment, then placed them in the trader's hand. One dry season evening, Obinna came home from school and found her sitting outside in the fading light, staring at the soil. "Mama, are you sick?" She looked up and smiled. "I am only tired, my son. Eat your food." She did not tell him that earlier that day she had secretly signed away the last piece of land her husband had left behind, all to keep him in school one more year. There was one evening that Mama Arlise kept in her heart for the rest of her life. Obinna was 15. He had just come home with his end-of-term results, the paper creased from how tightly he had held it on the walk home. He placed it before her without a word. She looked at it slowly, moving her finger beneath the numbers. She could not read well, but she could read this. First position in his class. She pressed both hands over her mouth. Then she held him, this tall, serious boy who sometimes forgot to hug back, and she held him until he stopped being stiff about it. That night, after they had eaten, Obinna sat across from her and made a promise. His voice was quiet and steady, the voice of someone who had decided something. "Mama, I will make everything better. I will build us a proper house. You will never farm for other people again. I will take care of you. I swear this." She believed him completely, not because he said it, but because she saw it in his eyes. That seriousness, that intention. A relative who had come to visit that evening smiled at the boy. But after Obinna went inside, the relative leaned toward Mama Arlise and said something that stayed with her long after the visit ended.
He means it now. They always mean it now.
But when poverty disappears, gratitude sometimes disappears with it. Mama Arlise told her to stop speaking nonsense. When Obinna finished secondary school, the question of university arrived like a heavy stone. There was no money. There had never been money. But by now the village had watched the boy closely enough to know he was not ordinary. His teachers said it openly. His results said it louder. So the village did something rare. They gathered. Not a formal meeting with elder chairs and palm wine, just a quiet coming together of people who believed in something. A woman who sold tomatoes contributed what she could. A man who had once borrowed money from Mama Arlise and never quite repaid it handed over 2 worn notes. The church collected a small sum. Matsi Obi himself gave without being asked. It was not enough for 4 years of university. It was enough for the first year, and faith, they said, would handle the rest. The morning Obinna left for the city, the road outside was lined with people who had no reason to be there except that they wanted to see him go. Mama Arlise walked with him to the bus stop. She carried his bag without letting him take it from her. When the bus arrived, she pressed both palms against his face and looked at him for a long time. Then she said, quietly enough that only he could hear, "Never forget where your feet first touched the earth." He nodded. He boarded the bus. He did not look back through the window, which she noticed. But she waved anyway. He was gone for 8 years. Letters came at first, short ones, written in the careful script of someone who did not have much time. Then the letters slowed. Then they stopped. Mama Arlise was not angry. She told herself he was busy. She told herself success required full attention. She continued working. The land was gone, so she farmed on a small borrowed plot. Her knees ached now in the mornings. She rubbed them with palm oil before getting up. When Obinna finally returned, she heard the car before she saw it. The sound of an engine that did not belong on the village road. She was outside when it came through the gate. He stepped out wearing clothes she had never seen on a person from Umunna. He had grown broader. His face had changed, smoother, somehow more closed. He held her briefly. He smelled of something she could not name. The village descended quickly. There was no quiet reunion. There was celebration and noise and neighbors and food. Mama Arlise stood to the side most of the evening, watching her son accept praises with the ease of someone who had grown accustomed to them. She was proud, deeply, quietly proud. But that night, Two of Obinna's city friends sat near the fire with him. One of them glanced toward where Mama Arlise sat across the yard. Then he leaned toward Obinna and said something that made Obinna go very still. Your mother still dresses like a poor market woman. The first embarrassment happened on a Thursday. Obinna had invited two business associates from the city to see the house, men in clean clothes who arrived in another clean car and looked around the compound with measuring eyes. Mama Arlise, not knowing this was a special occasion, did what she had always done. She welcomed them the way the village welcomed guests. She brought out kola nut. She spoke to them warmly in a mix of Igbo and rough English. She pulled a stool close and sat with them. The men were polite. They smiled at all the right moments. Obinna smiled too, but it was a tight smile, the kind stretched over something else. After the men left, he found his mother in the kitchen.
Umunna.
His voice was calm, but edged. When I have visitors, please do not sit with us. She looked up from the pot. I was only welcoming them. You were speaking too loudly, laughing too much. He paused. These are not market people. They are educated people. The word landed between them like something thrown. Mama Arlise set down the spoon in her hand. She looked at her son for a long moment, really looked at him, the way you look at a road you thought you knew when you realize it has changed. She said nothing. She turned back to the pot. But something had shifted. She felt it in her chest, the way you feel a door close somewhere deep in a house. It started slowly, the way these things always start. So slowly that you could almost miss each individual step. Only when you looked back at the whole distance did you see how far you had walked in the wrong direction. Obinna's city friends visited more often now. Business meetings at the house. Dinners. Men with briefcases and women with expensive shoes. Each time, Mama Arlise was asked to stay inside. At first Obinna framed it gently. Mama, you must be tired. Go and rest. Later he stopped framing it. Don't come out until they leave. His friends did not mean to cause harm, but they spoke carelessly, the way comfortable people do. One evening, after Mama Arlise had cleared plates from the table and gone back in, a friend named Chitty shook his head with a laugh. Brother, you are a big man now. How can a big man be living with a poor old woman who dresses like she is going to a bush farm? What will clients think? The other men laughed. Obinna laughed too. Then he became quiet. That night, Chitty said something else, his voice lower now, more like advice than a joke. Why not build her a small hut behind the main house? Give her her own space. It will be better for everyone. Obinna went to bed without responding. But in the morning, the idea was still there. Growing. Feeding on his pride. He told himself he was just thinking about it. He chose a Sunday to tell her. After church. After food. When the day was soft and people were not rushed. He sat down across from his mother in the main room and folded his hands the way he did when he was organizing his thoughts. Mama, he said, I want to do something good for you. She waited. I am going to build you a room at the back. Your own private space. Quiet. Away from all the coming and going. You will be more comfortable there. She looked at him steadily. I am comfortable here. It will be better, Mama. The front of the house is always full of people. Business. You will have peace. She knew. Of course she knew. She was old, not foolish. She had lived long enough to understand the difference between being given something and being removed from something. But she also loved her son. She believed still, even now, that there was a version of him that could return to himself. So she said, if that is what you want. He looked relieved. He patted her hand. She moved her few things to the small room at the back of the compound 3 days later. It was clean but bare. It looked out on the fence and the bush beyond it. The village noticed. They noticed the way villages always notice things that matter, quietly, carefully, without announcing that they are watching. And they began to whisper. There are some humiliations so public that they leave a mark not just on the person who suffers them, but on every witness. It happened at the village age grade meeting, held outside under the trees, where palm wine went around and voices got loose. One of Obinna's friends, a man named Emeka, who drank too much and thought too little, decided to be funny. He raised his cup and said, loudly enough for 24 people to hear. "Obinna, I heard you have your poor village mother hidden behind the house like she is a bad secret." Laughter. Not from everyone, but from enough. Obinna felt every eye on him.
He felt his chest tighten.
And instead of saying something simple and true, "She is my mother, she is not hidden, this joke is not funny," he did something that would stay with him far longer than the laughter. He looked at Emika and said sharply, "Don't talk about things you do not understand. She has caused me enough trouble." Silence followed. The laughter died. Then, from behind a nearby tree where she had been walking back from the stream, came the sound of a bucket being set down very carefully on the ground. Mama Arlise had heard every word. She did not speak. She picked up her bucket. She walked toward the back of the compound with her head straight and her shoulders unbowed. But everyone who saw her face that day understood. A line had been crossed that cannot be uncrossed. Her name was Ngozi. She came from a family in a nearby town, educated, polished, with a way of holding herself that made you aware of your own posture. Obinna met her through business. He was proud to be seen with her. She was proud to be entering a life like his. She visited the compound twice before she said anything directly. The third time, she sat with Obinna after dinner and spoke carefully. "Your mother is a good woman," she began. "I can see that." Obinna waited. "But Obinna, you are working so hard to build a certain kind of life.
People see how you live.
They judge quickly." She paused. A man cannot appear to be successful if the women around him look like they come from poverty. He started to speak, but she continued. "I am not saying anything bad about Mama. I am saying what people will say. And you know I am right." He was quiet for a long time. Ngozi reached over and touched his hand. "You have to choose the life you want to live." She left early that evening. Obinna sat alone in the main room. He looked at the walls he had built, the tiles his money had bought, the ceiling fan that turned in the silence. He thought about Ngozi's words. He thought about Chitty's words, about Emika's laughter, about what people said. And that night, for the first time, he thought of his mother not as the woman who built him, but as an obstacle to the image he was building. That was the night the decision began to form. She came to him on a quiet afternoon when no guests were expected and no business meetings were scheduled. She came to him the way a person approaches something they've been putting off for too long. She sat down. She folded her hands. "Obinna," she said, "I need to speak with you." He looked up from his papers but did not fully stop what he was doing. "Something is wrong between us," she said. "I feel it. You feel it. Let us not pretend." He set his pen down slowly. "You are hiding me," she said. "From your friends. From this woman you are seeing. I am your mother, Obinna. Not a servant. Not a problem to be managed."
His jaw tightened.
"Mama, I am not hiding you. You told me not to come out of my room when guests arrive. That is for your comfort. My comfort." She repeated the words without raising her voice, which was more devastating than shouting. "When last did you eat dinner with me? When last did you ask how my knees are? When last did you sit with me and not treat me like something you are embarrassed to explain?" Obinna stood up from the chair. I built this house. I provide everything here. I am not embarrassed. Then why do I live behind it like an old broken thing you do not know how to throw away?" The words hung in the air. A neighbor's radio played faintly through the wall. Then the argument truly began, and it grew louder and louder and louder. The neighbors heard everything. They heard Obinna's voice rise and fall. They heard Mama Arlise's steady, quiet responses, which somehow made him louder. At the center of it was a truth that Obinna could not face. "You did not do this alone," Mama Arlise said. Her voice broke slightly, but held. "I sold my land, Obinna. I sold my mother's earrings. I went without food so you could eat. I carried loads for strangers so you could go to school." "I know what you did," he snapped. "Then say it. Say it out loud." Silence. "You are acting like everything you built from nothing. Like I was not there. Like I did not bleed for this." She was steady and terrible and clear. "I am not asking for gratitude every day. I am asking to be treated like a human being in the house I helped build." And then Obinna said the thing he could not take back. His voice was low, controlled, almost calm. You did what any mother should do. The room went completely still. Mama Arlise looked at her son the way you look at a stranger, wearing a face you recognize. She did not respond. There was nothing left to respond to. He did not plan for it to happen the way it did. But pride does not plan, it moves, and you follow it, and later you are somewhere you cannot believe you chose to go. He walked to the back room. He pulled open her door. He collected the few things she kept there, a wrapper folded on the chair, her Bible, a small tin of ointment, and carried them to the front of the house. He opened the front door.
He placed her things outside on the step.
He turned around. She was standing behind him, watching. Leave this compound, he said. His voice had no anger left. It was worse than anger, flat.
Decided.
You are not welcome here anymore. Mama Arlise looked at him for a long moment. She did not beg. She had begged enough in her life. Begged the soil for harvest. Begged the sky to hold rain. She would not beg her own son. She picked up her things. She walked out. At the gate she paused for just a moment with her back to him. Then she kept walking. Down the road. Into the afternoon. Without looking back. Obinna closed the door. He told himself it was the right thing. He told himself this for a very long time. The village saw her go. They saw her walking down the red road with a small bundle under her arm, her back straight, her pace steady. And they did nothing. This is the hardest part of the story to tell. Not because it is complicated, but because it is true. People who could have helped stood behind their doors. Some said it was not their business. Some feared offending Obinna, who had money and could be useful or difficult. Some felt guilt twist inside them, and then let it pass. A young woman named Chioma stepped off her porch.
Mama Arlise.
Come inside. But Mama Arlise shook her head gently. Thank you, my daughter. I am all right. She was not all right, but she was walking. Matsi Obi watched from his doorway. He was very old and had seen many things. He knew that some moments are not meant to be interrupted. They must be fully felt, so they are not forgotten. He watched until she turned the bend and disappeared. No one in the village knew where she went. She simply vanished from Umunna the way some people do, quietly, without announcement, as if the village had never deserved her in the first place. She walked until the village was behind her and the road became unfamiliar. She spent the first night in a church whose doors were left open for travelers. In the morning she kept walking. She arrived in a town called Obinna 3 days later. She found a space at the edge of the market and began selling akara, fried bean cakes, from a small clay pot. The first week was hard. The second was less hard. By the end of the first month she had a small but steady stream of morning customers. The market people liked her. She did not gossip. She did not cheat. When someone needed advice, she gave it plainly. They started calling her Mama, not because she was old, but because she carried something that made you feel steadied. One afternoon, a thin boy of about 9 sat near her stall. He had been there 3 days in a row. He said his name was Emeka, and that he had no family left. She gave him food. The next day, she gave him more. On the third day she said, "You can sleep here if you help me clean up." He nodded. He slept there that night. And somehow, without either of them deciding it exactly, he stayed. While Mama Arlise was rebuilding herself quietly in Obinna, Obinna was expanding. He started a second business, construction supplies. Then a third, transport. His name grew larger. He wore better clothes each year. He was photographed at events and spoke at community gatherings. Ngozi married him. Their wedding was talked about for months. A live band, hired dancers, a generator that ran all night. But a hardness settled into Obinna in those years. He became difficult with his workers. Quick to accuse. Slow to forgive. He paid on time, but made people feel small for being paid. His closest business partner, a man named Felix, watched all of this from a careful distance. Felix smiled at the right times. He agreed loudly in meetings. He praised Obinna in public. And quietly, over 2 years, he began to move money. Not all at once. Small amounts at first, paper-thin adjustments that even a sharp eye might miss. Then larger amounts. Then very large amounts hidden inside ordinary transactions like stones wrapped in cloth. Obinna was too busy being successful to look down at the ground beneath him. In Agida, years were passing. Mama Adi's small Akra stall became a food spot, 4 benches, a zinc roof. She cooked jollof rice and pepper soup and the kind of beans that made people close their eyes. She was not rich, but she was steady. Young Emeka grew. He helped her every morning before school, fanning the fire, washing pots, carrying water. He was serious about school the way children are when they understand it is a door. When fees came, Mama Adi's paid them. When he needed books, she found them. When he was anxious before exams, she said, "You carry all the hard work inside you already. Just go and pour it out on the paper." He finished secondary school with results that brought his teachers to her door. "This boy should go to university," one said. "He has a gift." She nodded. She already knew. She saved for 3 more years. She sold a gold bangle she had kept from her old life. She asked no one for help, not a village, not a committee. Just herself. Emeka went to university on her savings. He studied medicine. In Agida, people shook their heads in quiet wonder. This woman, they said, has done it again. It started with a missing signature. An account that should have held 12 million naira held 4. A supplier Obinna had paid twice appeared in the records, but only one payment had reached the supplier. A transport vehicle listed as an asset had been quietly sold 18 months ago. Felix had been gone 2 weeks before Obinna understood he was not coming back. The full picture took another week. Papers spread across tables. Numbers circled in red. By the time the final figure was clear, Obinna sat very still, staring at the wall. More than half the company's operating funds.
Gone.
He called Felix's number. No answer. He called again. He sent people to Felix's house. The house was locked. Neighbors had not seen him. The debts that followed were not kind. Suppliers needed payment. Workers who had waited for salaries waited no longer. Loans taken for expansion had no income left behind them. One morning Ngozi asked quietly, "How bad is it?" He told her. She did not shout. She did not cry.
She was quiet for a long time.
Then she began packing a bag, careful, organized, the kind of packing that means the decision is already made. She left 4 days later. The house was the last to go. He had borrowed against it. The walls, the tiles, the gate with the padlock. When the bank's judgment came, it arrived with a date, a letter, and a man in a uniform who waited while Obinna packed. He moved into a rented room with a window that looked at another wall. He told himself it was temporary. The same people who had sat at his table, whose relatives he had employed, became busy. They answered his calls less. When they saw him on the road, they had places to be. This is the particular cruelty of collapsed success. It is not just that the money is gone. It is that you discover how many of your relationships were built around it. Without the money, you are not a different person to them. You are a different category of person. One evening, he ran into Matsi Obi's son on the market road. The young man was polite, but did not stop long. As he was leaving, he turned back and asked simply, "Obinna, where is your mother these days?" The question was a stone dropped into still water. Obinna stood there long after the young man had gone. "Where is your mother?" He did not know. And this felt worse than all the rest. He started to ask, not loudly. He asked age-mates of his mother in Umunna, traders who used to see her at the market. Finally, he sat across from Matsi Obi in the old man's familiar hut, with none of the pride he had carried the last time he was there. Matsi Obi looked at him steadily. "You chased her out," the old man said. "Not to wound. Just as fact." "I know," Obinna said. "What has changed?" Obinna could not answer quickly. Loss alone does not make a man good. Loss clears the ground. What grows there depends on the man. "I was wrong," he finally said. "About all of it." Matsi Obi said he had heard she went east. After that, he did not know. Obinna spent months following thin threads. A woman who remembered someone matching her description. A trader who had heard of a food seller near Agida. Threads that often broke. Months became a year. Then 2. Then one evening, someone told him something that stopped his breath entirely. He heard it from a man returning from a medical conference in Enugu. Strange thing, the man said. A young doctor gave a talk. Sharp young man, Dr. Emeka something. At the end, someone asked how he came to study medicine. The man paused. He said there was a woman who found him when he had nothing. An old woman selling food in Agida market. She fed him, kept him in school, paid his university fees herself. He paused again. He was crying when he said it, right there in front of everyone. He called her the mother who saved my life. He said she was from Umunna village. Obinna went completely still. His mother, cast out into the rain with a small bag, had taken another lost child and done for him exactly what she had done for Obinna. She had built a doctor where there had been an orphan. While he had been chasing money and losing it, she had been quietly making the world better. The man looked at him. You look pale. Are you all right? Obinna was not all right. He stood up and asked for directions to Agida. It took 4 hours by bus and 20 minutes on foot, following directions from a woman at the Agida market.
Mama daeze.
The food woman?
Yes.
Down this road, turn at the mango tree. Look for the house with a green door. He stood in front of the green door for a long time before knocking. When she appeared, he could not speak. She was older, visibly, undeniably older. Her hair had gone fully white. She moved with the careful slowness of someone whose joints had carried many years. But her eyes were the same, still steady, still clear, looking at him without hatred, without satisfaction, without the performance of either forgiveness or coldness. She simply looked at him. Behind her, a young man appeared, tall, well-dressed. Dr. Emeka. He looked from Obinna to Mama Arlise, then quietly stepped back inside. Obinna tried to speak. Nothing came. Then his knees gave. He did not decide to kneel. They simply folded beneath him, the way things do when they have been holding too much for too long. He knelt in the dust in front of his mother's green door, and when his voice finally came, it was barely a voice at all.
Mama.
I am sorry.
Please.
Forgive me. She let him cry for a while, the way a good mother does. Then she reached down and placed her hand on his head, the way she used to when he was sick as a child, and she sat beside his mat through the night. Get up, my son, she said. Get up from this ground. She held his face in both hands and looked at him, the way she had looked at him at the bus stop the morning he left for the city. Then she said the words he had traveled all this way to hear. I forgave you long ago, Obinna. Long ago. I am your mother. It is not in me to hold it. He wept again. She let him. But when he asked her to return to Umunna, she was gentle and clear. I have a life here. I have a son here. She nodded toward the door. I am not leaving it. He understood. Some things cannot be rebuilt in the original place. Some wounds heal, but they heal differently, and the scar does not look like the original skin. He visited her every month after that. He sat with her. He ate her cooking. He got to know Emeka, who became something like a brother he had not expected. One thing is inevitable. Pride can build walls, even love struggles to cross. Forgiveness heals the heart, but it cannot return the years that were lost.